Alright guys, my name is Goblin. Today we're discussing another big topic very commonly discussed within the community. Should the classic TBC raids be time-gated? So what do I mean by time-gated? Not many people know this, but the original Burning Crusade was actually released with Karazhan, Grill's Lair, Magfarodon's Lair, SSC, Tempest Keep and Battle for Might and Hydra. So that's a total of 6 raids for a total of 29 raid bosses. To put it in perspective, the new Shadowlands expansion is releasing with 1 raid with 10 bosses. Back in those days, game developers were largely in charge of how they made their games and not accountants. But anyway, there are obviously disadvantages and advantages to both scenarios, whether the raids will be time gated or not. For instance, only Karazhan, Grills and Magfarodon's releasing on the first phase. Pretty much similar to how private servers have released the content for TBC. Normally in a private server there will be free updates progressively releasing all of the raids that are available during TBC's launch. I'll quickly go over my personal opinion. To be honest, I'd be so happy if classic TBC actually comes out. I wouldn't be bothered either way they do this. But what I'm going to talk about is, you know, the issues behind both scenarios occurring. The fact that the original Burning Crusade launched with all of those raids and all those bosses wasn't really that much of an issue because the bosses were more difficult, and that meant that the content actually time-gated itself. So first of all, there was the old talent system, the 2.0 talents, which are different to 2.4.3 talents. The old itemization was in place when Karazhan gear was pretty terrible and was only a little bit better than heroic dungeon gear, in some cases just pretty much equal. But here's the issue: if Blizzard intends to release classic WoW very similar to how they, release classic TBC similar to how they did classic WoW, with patch 2.4.3 fully fleshed out in place, that would be insanely bad because everyone would be buffed about 20%. Probably even higher than that if you factor in the new talents and how much more powerful the classes are naturally, but their gear, all our gear will be much more powerful over Karazhan gear, for instance. And then on top of this, in the Sunwell patch, all of the raids were nerfed by about 20%. Actual boss health and, you know, boss damaging abilities were nerfed. So if Blizzard released classic TBC with the Sunwell nerf patch in place, these raids are going to be up to 40-50% even easier than they were in the original TBC. This means that the content will be cleared extremely quickly, just like it was in Classic WoW. In Classic WoW wasn't much of an issue because you only had Elixir and Molten Core available at launch, but having, you know, 29 raid bosses and 6 raids available at launch is going to be a very different story. What will very likely happen is people will clear the content extremely fast, and then about 2 to 3, maybe 4 months down the line of classic TBC's launch, there will be a huge and drastic, vicious population drop because people will just be, well, they've done it. They've done classic TBC and they'll be bored of the game and just feel less invested in the game, and yeah, they'll just be less motivated to actually play, and there'll be a massive population drop. Population drops can be very problematic, particularly for servers that are currently, you know, already low population, and then there will be massive issues when it comes to finding partners for your arena team and, you know, actually getting the queue to pop in the first place. Not to mention there will be potentially a lack of raid guilds for you to join and a lack of people to recruit to your guild. People are going to be able to get a severe advantage over other players. I know this is the nature of an MMO and we shouldn't moan about it because this will always inevitably happen. You know, there needs to be a level of imbalance, otherwise progressing your character is entirely pointless. The balanced character power mindset has totally ruined PvP on retail because farming gear is pretty much almost pointless on retail when it comes to PvP. But it will be, in my opinion, the imbalance issue is going to be so severe, it's just going to be too much to deal with really, because you're going to have people in arena with Tempest Keep and Highjar loot within the first month of a game's release. This means there will be very powerful PvE items with lots of gem sockets, for instance, and weapons with lots of gem sockets, and weapons with particular proc effects that can be really powerful in arena. This will most likely only affect the 2v2 bracket because you will obviously need a decent amount of PvP gear if you want to seriously progress in arena in a 3v3 environment. But when it comes to 2v2s, you know, people only really need to kill the other team very, very quickly. Some people queue double DPS like Rogue and Mage. You only really need to do is have an extremely high amount of burst damage which you can very easily get with decked out in really strong raid gear, and sometimes, you know, TV2 arena games are over in about 30 seconds. This will particularly boost rogues a lot, because rogues can get away with equipping PvE gear, again because they open in stealth. They only really need to perfect that really extremely destructive opener to win the game, and then even if they like lose that opener, they can avoid damage so ridiculously well, because they're so speedy and they have stealth and everything, that taking extra damage from not having resilience gear isn't that much of an issue, so they can kind of get away with having more PvE gear equipped, particularly weapons and things like that. So overall, this could totally ruin the 2v2 bracket, because it would make it so incredibly imbalanced, because there'll be people queuing as double DPS, decked out in raid gear, just absolutely one-shotting people with perfect stealth openers. And whether you're a casual or hardcore PvP player, I do believe that the 2v2 bracket will be very badly imbalanced. I mean, a 3v3 bracket might not be so bad, but I think there still could be some potential issues in a 3v3 bracket. And, you know, arena rating actually matters in TBC, right? Because imbalance issues aren't so much of an issue in Classic WoW, because it's just Battlegrounds and you're farming honour, and it's not really based on, you know, your rank isn't really based on your skill. But when the ranking system is entirely based on your skill, and people are gaining an unfair advantage because they had the freedom to play the game 16 hours a day, you know, for weeks and weeks on end, because they, you know, either could take time off work or don't work. These people who can invest more time into the game will gain too much of a severe advantage over other players. I know that the more time you put into a game, the more powerful you should become, and therefore you should be more powerful than other players, but I think the imbalance will just be too severe. Obviously, if the raids did release how they did originally in TBC, it would be pretty cool to see everything exactly how it was in the original TBC. There would be so much raid content for you to clear to keep everyone busy for an extremely long time, because me personally, I'd probably play in a more casual guild. I wouldn't join an elitist guild that's going to clear over content in a month. I'd join a guild that probably would, you know, eventually clear over content. It'd probably take us a good 3 to 4 months to clear the content. And the great thing would be, like, you'd, you know, progress through Karazhan, take your time to progress through Karazhan, maybe a couple of weeks, and then when you're done with Karazhan, you know, for like a month or so, then you can automatically immediately move on to the next raid. And even when you're done with Grills and Maggots, you can immediately move on to the next raid. So there'd just be so much for everyone to do. If Blizzard actually releases the raids and the itemization of the pre-nerf conditioning, so when everything, you know, the characters are not buffed about 20% with their items, the raids are much harder, then this won't be an issue, because like I mentioned before, there will be a natural time gate in the actual difficulty of the raid content like it was back in the day. They could also do what they do on retail and actually buff the raid for the first week or so, you know, before it gets killed, and then when it does get killed by the world first guild, then it will be nerfed slightly for the other players. That's what basically happens on Mythic mode, you know, whatever the latest raid is going to be on retail, so that the elitist players don't get too far ahead of everyone else, and that would kind of fix the potential imbalance issues. But let's conclude the video. I personally think that it's more likely that the content will get time gated, because it just naturally makes sense. I think the content will release in 6 phases, just exactly like Classic WoW did, and basically exactly how private servers always release this TBC content. You know, you'll have Phase 1 will be Karazhan, Grills and Magfaridons, then Phase 2 will be Tempest Keep and SSC, Phase 3 Hyjal, Phase 4 Zulaman, Phase 5 Black Temple, and Phase 6 Sunwell. So yeah, basically exactly the same as most private servers do it. It would be interesting if actually time-gated Karazhan, Grills and Magfaridons on launch like they do on retail, because what happens on retail, if you don't know, the raid when, you know, the expansion launches is actually not available until 2 weeks after the expansion is launched, so people can, you know, enjoy the world content, leveling up, and do the dungeons and everything like that. I personally do prefer that kind of style when it comes to like an expansion launch. I don't think it will happen personally, but I always found that, you know, when you're farming dungeons, you're always much more likely to make friends. And I just think it'd be a great thing for the community to have 2 weeks where everyone's, you know, out in the open world doing the group quests, having fun and doing the dungeons, because in a dungeon you're in a much more close knit small little group, and it's much easier to make friends. And yeah, I just think it would be a nice thing for the first couple of weeks to you know, everyone just be super chilled out doing the open world content and doing some dungeons, making friends and everything, and then the raid content comes out 2 weeks after the launch. But anyway guys, if you liked the video, please consider subscribing. I know a few people, when they actually do check if they're subscribed or not, they actually are not, when in fact they were, thought they were subscribed. It's because YouTube randomly unsubscribes people as well, which is very frustrating. I see it in my analytics. But anyway, I'm rambling. If you really want to help out, please subscribe to the channel and give a like on the video. But anyway, my name is Goblin. Until my next video, ciao.